tool package, and it's been an incredible asset for me. But I am deeply committed to the concerns that all of you have about noise, pollution, and safety at the airport. The challenge that I see as a voter, and the reason that I got so involved in this issue, is that it's such a complex topic. There are so many facts, and aviation, as I learned to fly about 12 years ago, you know, when we're taking the pilot lessons, there is just a ton of federal regulation. It's almost as complex as tax code. And so to understand this as a community, I think requires a forum where we can appropriately be educated, understand the issues related to the airport, and make a decision as a community whether we ultimately want to keep the airport or decide to close the airport. So I'm committed to that process, and as the Vice President of the Airport Association, you know, there's been a lot of change at the airport just in the last couple of years. And I really believe the more I educate myself that there's a lot that can be done today and in the very recent future to improve the situation at the airport. Things that have been suggested by the city, like electric auxiliary power units. We are actively looking at all the options for greener fuels, unleaded gas, biodiesel, all the things that, when implemented, can have instant impacts to the residents around the airport. I learned to fly at Santa Monica in 2003, and I just want to spend just a second talking about that experience because I think it's relevant. I was recovering from cancer surgery at John Wayne, came across this photograph of my grandfather's airplane. And it was so inspiring to me because I was really looking for something to occupy my time in recovery. And I went down to the airport and decided to just take a lesson. And I got hooked right from that very moment. And the opportunities that have come to me through learning to fly are hard to even explain. It's just been an amazing experience for me. And I encourage any of you and offer to any of you who've never been to the airport or would like an experience at the airport, contact one of us tonight. We'll take you for a flight, give you the opportunity to see really what our municipal airport is all about. The amazing part of this story is I actually found this exact airplane. I was able to purchase back my grandfather's airplane that he bought in 1948, sold in 1955, and I paid less than I paid for my last new car. So there's a real fallacy that most of the aviators at the airport are millionaires. We're not. It's an undertaking that's very similar to boating or RVing. We spend about the same to buy the machines and about the same to operate them. So there is certainly a percentage of people that operate very expensive airplanes at the airport, but 80% of the operations are people like me that are flying pretty simple airplanes for work and for pleasure. So that's just a little background on me. The issue that I really see as a voter that we're here to decide about is because this is such an important issue to everyone in the community, do we leave that decision in the hands of the City Council, or should we as voters have the opportunity to decide about the future of this asset? I deeply believe that the voters should decide. As I mentioned, again, think about this, 227 acres. It's the largest undeveloped parcel in Los Angeles County, certainly in Santa Monica. It is critically important for all of us to understand the entirety of that issue and make an informed decision. And one of the issues that is covered, and I encourage all of you to read this City Council report from, it's April 30th of 2013, and there are multiple other ones that clearly define some of the concerns that we should as a community really be considering when we decide whether to close the airport or not. And clearly, I like aviation, so I would probably vote to keep the airport. But I absolutely believe that if you don't like the airport, you should reserve your right to vote no. Because leaving this in the hands of the City Council, it really leaves it to a certain amount of uncertainty. And I believe that you, if you're concerned about the airport in positive ways or negative ways, should keep that right for yourself. And our ballot initiative does really just that. This slide is one of the reasons that I got intimately involved in this issue. And it has very little to do with operations at the airport, and a lot to do with the influence that the Federal Aviation Administration has over airport operations. So the FAA controls building height in a 2,000-foot radius, close to 3.9 miles, that's this outer line around the airport. So it's not that they would, in every circumstance, say you're about to build a building too tall. But if we close the airport, if we as a community choose to do that, the instant opportunity exists for development dollars to come in from the state of California, from offshore, from somewhere, to potentially start building very high-density buildings. And the area that I'm most concerned about are the places outside the city limits of Santa Monica. This area that our airport protects from high-rise buildings that could be obstacles to navigation for airplanes extends all the way out to Century City, out to the other side of Marina del Rey, but the area that I see is right along the 405 here. Now, can you imagine a handful of parcels, let's say one, where there's a Circuit City now, one-story Circuit City building. The developers now have erased this question mark by us closing the airport that the FAA would not allow them to build, say, a 40 or 50-story high-rise building. Do you imagine that that's possible? Now, I read about a building like this in Vegas, 45 stories, okay, $1.5 to $2 million units, 450 units in that building. So imagine, would the city of Los Angeles be interested in that amount of tax roll coming in? And what would the impact be to our city of that kind of high-rise development? Now, there'd be benefits, I suppose. We'd have a lot of traffic coming into the city, visiting our businesses and all that thing. But I, as a resident, am most concerned about density, about traffic, about the things that I struggle with every day in this city. And a handful, maybe even one building like that, would have a massive impact. So again, this is an important thing for you to understand. And I want you to have the ability to say, I don't think that'll happen. I think we should close the airport. Or, I think that's very likely, and that could have a huge impact on my quality of life. And maybe the airport and its cost to the community is worth it. So this is a really important thing to consider. In this particular City Council report, that was authored by our Director of Public Works and the City Attorney, they talk about the potential impact of losing our bubble of airspace. So the Santa Monica Airport has a 2,500-foot bubble of airspace that is controlled by our control tower. And that limits the height at which jets can cross over the Santa Monica VOR, or a navigational aid, at our airport. So what will happen if that airspace goes away is the FAA will redraw the entirety of the airspace in the LA area. And when the FAA does that, they open it for public discussion. So that means that the airlines will lobby the FAA to save fuel by coming a little bit lower over Santa Monica. Now, the FAA won't speculate on how low that may be, and I have no idea. But if it was 10% lower, again, imagine, use your imagination, it's very likely that there will be an adjustment. How low an adjustment? I don't know. But I want you to be informed and say, well, that is a possibility. The city says it's a possibility. Read this for yourself. A very likely possibility is the quote. So, if that's possible, is that a trade that we want to make? And you get to decide if we have the opportunity as a community to vote. And the really final piece that I want to chat a little bit about is the language of our ballot initiative. It's 2 simple paragraphs. We have handouts here tonight for you to read for yourself. There has been a major misrepresentation of our ballot initiative, and that is summarized in a very simple way. People are saying that the language implies that you would need a majority of registered voters. Now think about that for a second. A potential voter, a registered voter, is not a voter. A voter is a person who casts a ballot. And the city attorney came out and made a very clear statement that that is not what this language implies. And can you imagine a court in this country anywhere that would interpret it that way? That it would be the registered, a majority of our registered voters, not the majority of the people that turned out to vote, I want the airport, I don't want the airport. It's a very, very simple initiative, and it puts the power of choice in your hands, in my hands. And I would vote yes, and if you chose to vote no, I believe you want to protect that right to say, I don't think the airport's benefits are worth it to me. and that I'm willing to give up some of these protections that the airspace provides and roll the dice and see if we end up, I don't know how many people here saw the movie Her, but the director of that movie created a vision of LA that was high rises from downtown to the beach in every direction. And one of the things that a lot of people don't think about, but I'm sure if I explain this to you, you'll recognize it. All the airports that we have in LA along the coastline overlap each other. These rings of protection. So Santa Monica overlaps Torrance, or overlaps LAX, which overlaps Torrance, which overlaps Long Beach, which overlaps John Wayne. And when you drive or fly over the coastline in our communities in the greater LA basin, we do not have giant high-rises at the shore that do exist in most coastal areas around the world. So there are benefits that we have from the airport, and as a community, what I would like to see, if the city says we should close the airport, and again, if you read this staff report, the city attorney has said, this is a major uncertainty. There was an article in the Mirror today that she was quoted in the meeting on Tuesday night as saying, it's not going to close anytime soon. The feds have said they will sue the minute the city chooses to close. But again, if we as a community decide we're willing to fight that battle, we're willing to go head-to-head with the FAA and choose to close the airport, then again, I'm all for us making that choice. But I want us to do it in an informed way with the ballot choice being the driver. And then when the city puts this on the initiative, we as a city should figure out the right forum to have the appropriate debates. And maybe that's something like town hall meetings, some opportunity where we can come together as a group and really informed, in an informed way, decide about the future of our airport. So there are a handful of things. Gloria has a handout that will kind of explain some of the details of this, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I think one of the pieces I want to end with, and this for me, I'm just a regular person like you. I'm a small business owner here in Santa Monica. I have my production company here, and I am just concerned about good governance. And these are a couple of great quotes from one of our founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson. The first one I love. The cornerstone of democracy rests on the foundation of an educated electorate. Now, I am absolutely for the opposition's belief that a park is the best thing. Great, but look at both sides, because you don't get the park for nothing. And the city has come out again in this council report and said we don't think we can afford it. But again, if we as a city want to debate the pros and cons of the options of not having an airport against the options of having an airport, we should do that in what I believe is an appropriate forum, with a vote where everyone in the city gets to say, I want the airport, I don't want the airport. Our ballot initiative is simply that. The counter that the city has come up with clearly takes that vote away from you and keeps it in the hands of the city council. So I encourage you guys to educate yourselves. Take the time to read the city documents this document is aimed at the city council and the mayor. So for a voter, this is a pretty fabulous place to begin, in theory, an unbiased place. It's not me being a pro-airport person, it's not coming from an anti-airport group, it's coming from our city attorney. Read this document, and you decide what you think is best. But I believe, as a citizen of this country, as a proud resident of Santa Monica, that this incredibly important land use decision should be left to you, not to the city council, to you.